Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the third season of The Founder Story. Today's episode is about, as you saw in the sign-up, about community shapers. And I'd like to start the story with a room like this. And some of you might have seen this room before, but I want you to shout out where you think this room is. And there might be a little hint, it might be a bit misleading, so shout out from the room where you think in, this place, what you see here, is. Oh, you were a little bit too specific already. Is it a Coop? No. Obviously, it's not a Coop, even though you see it there. It's a micro kitchen within the Google offices, and a micro kitchen sounds very fancy. Basically, it's nothing else what is in other companies the coffee corner, where people meet, have their coffee. We call it kitchen because there's also snacks, so it's a micro kitchen. And the reason why we have those places is obviously not just to give people the caffeine intake per day or the snacks they needed to power through the day, but it follows one interesting concept which has a larger impact than just nurturing people. And it's the concept of casual collision. Some of you who have been in the previous episode know already what casual collision means. And basically, it's the idea that people casually collide into each other and bumping into each other at work in the coffee corner, and by doing so, start openly talking about the challenges, the problems they're trying to face, because the likelihood that you're going to think about a problem differently is much bigger when you're not facing your screen frontward and have a human-to-human conversation. Why this is so important, casual collision, or the idea of exchanging problems to foster innovation, we see it in this statistic here. In one longer-term research from 2000 to 2020, where over 300 startups have been followed, a research has been done and surveyed afterwards with the startups who declared that they failed, and they've been asked why they failed. 12.8% of the founders have mentioned that the lack of using their network was one of the reasons. So obviously there is evidence out there that we see that the network plays a huge role in the success of the startup. So if you wonder now yourself, okay, where can we start? I mean, obviously today is a form of community with people returning, exchanging, and having this conversation, but we shouldn't be the only one here in Switzerland providing you this service. Actually, with courtesy of SICTIC, they did this exercise and tried to really map out how many communities are there actually in Switzerland, and to be precise, 253 communities where startups can find their communities and find their casual collision partner to exchange their problems. That number, however, might be a little bit mind-boggling, so that's why I'm very excited to have 3 people from that community coming on stage today, actually bringing different hats at the same time because they are engaged in different of these communities to talk about exactly how we best should engage with those communities, what are best practices, why are communities even important, and what not to do. In the end, we want to leave you after today with this little proverb, because as founders, it's not about running fast. And as the proverb says here, if you want to run fast, run alone. But if you want to run far, run together or go together. So we hope you're going to find people together where you can hop on this journey with after today. And this is our goal for tonight. To my first speaker, and for those who have been with Founder Story for quite some time now, know usually the Googler guests comes at the later stage to give their perspective onto the topic being discussed, because usually we want to create a discussion where from a Google perspective, we share what we see as a challenge as the startup grow and how that can unfold in the future. However, the Google speaker I have today is a very special guest because there's only a few people in Google who have expanded that time horizon and have seen Google going through that journey as it is today. He is, as you have seen in the description, employee number 8 at Google. So it is fair to say when he started at Google, it was really the startup, not bigger than many of yours company out there. And the question they have asked themselves probably wasn't that much different either. And What I like, however, is that person's job description hasn't much changed over the years because his responsibility was to make sure that Google's infrastructure upholds the demand we need to run Google smoothly. Whereas 25 years ago, it was probably just a few duct tapes keeping together some hard drives and making sure the server doesn't overheat with some supermarket bought fan. Nowadays, we're talking about obviously airport-sized data centers. So the way how a company culture has to develop with that scale is mind-boggling, and I'm very happy to dive deeper into exactly the culture which it took to get along to this journey, to this growth, and as well as how community has helped, obviously from a Californian perspective versus when we compare later with the Swiss startup scene. So ladies and gentlemen, please welcome on stage former Senior Vice President Infrastructure, Google Fellow, Urs Hölzle. Urs, thank you very much for joining.
You're welcome.
For my next speaker, she is definitely a character in the Swiss startup scene, and anyone who has been already engaging for a long time in the Swiss startup scene has come across many of her panel discussion. Isabelle today will come on stage with 3 different hats. The main one today with our partner, of course, the ETH AI Center, where she helps to grow that center internationally, which already exists since 3 years. But also, she wears the hat of Sandborn, which exists already for 8 years, and whose mission is to invest and foster startups, specifically with the perspective of driving diversity. Also, she leads S2S Ventures, a platform where students can invest into student startup, so also where innovation happens at the root. So ladies and gentlemen, please welcome on stage Isabelle Siegrist. So my next panelist has an interesting background. Also, has a Google background, but I think with the endeavors he has started over the last 10 years with SICTIC, it's definitely has marked its own fair place in the Swiss startup scene. For those who don't know SICTIC, by the way, the map you've seen before, you can find it on the website. SICTIC is today the largest angels investor club in Switzerland. So those who are in the early stage, definitely this is the right platform to start with and to find your angel investor to help you engage in your early endeavors. With SICTIC and other ventures Thomas have started, he helped create more than 25,000 jobs within Switzerland and even across the continent of Africa. So scaling is definitely a hat he wears and sees, and definitely community, how that plays into the role of that is something he can be talking a lot about. So ladies and gentlemen, please give a round of welcome to Thomas Dübendorfer. Welcome, Thomas. So, my next and last panelist, Merle, also wearing several hats. Today, coming on stage, you will see in a second, is the co-host of Swisspreneur. Swisspreneur, for those who haven't already subscribed to that channel, is the largest entrepreneurial podcast channel here in Switzerland. So you might recognize the voice, even if you don't recognize her face in a second. And also, Merle is leading the partnership with Impact Hub, a central place for startup also to start at. And the third hat she wears without coming out from Impact Hub, she created the org Female Founders, specifically to drive female founder success out in the market. So ladies and gentlemen, the largest applause, please help me welcome Merle. So, dear panelists, thank you very much and welcome to the Founder Story. It's a pleasure to have you all here. It's a very exciting lineup, very different heads. As I mentioned before, we have someone who has gone through that journey from the inside, but people who have seen hundreds, if not thousands of startups going through different cycles. But we also bring in the perspective of Switzerland versus US startup scene, what the differences are, and there's going to be a lot of great topics we can dive into. So let me first start with you, Urs. Recently you have changed the title from, let me not lie, SVP Infrastructure to now Google Fellow. So how's life as a Google Fellow?
Great, thank you. Yes, I didn't just change the title, I actually changed my role. Yes.
So, and also with that, you have moved, for those who don't know Urs and his background, he's actually from Switzerland, from Basel. But you,
not the same. Yes, as outsiders it's Basel, but it's not.
But you live a little bit further now, yes, and moved to New Zealand a couple of years ago. So you have really seen the growth of Google from when you were 8 people to what it is today, more than 180,000 sized global organization. Before we're going to dive into what the startup scene is like when you started over there and what we observe sometimes over here in Switzerland, I want to just quickly give a quick introduction also to the other panelists. Isabelle, again, in your own words, the endeavors with Sanborn, with the ETH AI Center and STS Venture, what are those communities and who are they designed to help?
Well, I think I started this journey also wanting to build communities, and that's how Sanborn evolved, where we're involved with hatching businesses together. After 8 years, the slogan holds. And with ETH AI Center, our goal was to have at a research institute with a core technology that will disrupt all of us in the next years, that we foster like collaborative innovation across over 120 professorships with over 45 industry partners, Google being one of them, and also help startups scale up. So the goal there is that we hopefully have a unicorn startup, and on the research side, a Nobel Prize coming from ETH, and that's what we're working on. And S2S, I see one investor student is here in the room, right? Hi, Noah. So the idea there is that in our daily job, Thomas and I invest in startups, and that we want to help students to know and understand how to invest, but so they can become founders and then understand the investor's game. So that's S2S.
Mm-hmm. Very great. Thomas, when we first talked to each other, it became clear that it wasn't that you started SICTIC after you left Google and you were looking for a new hobby, but entrepreneurship was already always in your DNA way before you joined Google. And now you have built the largest angels investor club. So for those who don't know SICTIC yet, can you give us in your own few words, what does SICTIC do?
Sure. So basically, first did a career in informatics, became a programmer and a leader of programmers. Then I quit Google. I have 9 startups co-founded in tech. And then I pulled out of operations in the startups and became an investor in startups. And then I had so much deal flow, which I couldn't share because I didn't find other angels that wanted to invest in tech. And I saw all these amazing talents and the great ideas, but every internet technology startups in Switzerland will never work because internet bubble crashed everything and we have proven we can't do it here. I said, no, we can do it. We just need to do it differently. And this is why I started SICTIC together with 5 other people to say, we invest in tech startups in the early stage up to 2 million Swiss francs. Basically, we're the first investors after the founders, right? And we think a little bit like founders. Because I first did the entrepreneurial journey before I became an investor. I didn't come from the investment side to begin with. Now, SICTIC is currently a community of more than 400 private people that invest their own money into tech startups which start in Switzerland and which want to scale up globally. So it's product startups that basically have the test market here, but ultimately they're going to earn more revenues abroad and might also have more people abroad, but basic decision making and incubation is here. And yeah, now we are this community, and SICTIC is a not-for-profit association. So I don't earn a salary. I do that for free since 10 years. I spent 1 day a week on SICTIC to give something back to Switzerland because I had an amazing start at ETH with Google and all the things I could do. So I wanted to give something back to change the future for my kids. Once they want to do something here, we have a different environment, right? And a lot of people told me it's not possible, and I always said, look, it's only not possible if it doesn't work. And we haven't even tried whether it works. And it works very well. The last 3 years, we had more than 100 financing rounds in Switzerland, which we have facilitated. It's about 70% of all early stage in tech, which currently our investors actually bootstrap. So I'm very happy it actually does work. And they got subsequent investments of 1.8 billion into our 300 portfolio companies. So they also seem to attract bigger investors than our early stage angels. So it seems to work, but we can still make it bigger.
Yeah. A couple of months ago, we actually had the honor to host one of the investor days from SICTIC here at Google. And it really was astonishing for me to see what high caliber startups you attract through that program, even at the very early stage. So while VCs already are throwing the money around, like you are really at the critical phase, but yet the caliber and the quality of startups you managed to find again and again at that scale, it was really, really amazing to see. So I think it's not just angel investor in the sense of like I borrow you some money, give you some trust, but really finding also the interesting business model and coaching them to become very, very successful. So we're going to dive deeper into that a second. Merle, different hats today, co-hosting Swisspreneur, podcaster, Impact Hub, female founder. Walk us through real quick of those 3 different endeavors you have.
Real quick. I would actually like to piggyback on what Thomas said, because what Swisspreneur does basically is finding these people that want to give back, founders that want to give back and share their stories, and we create a platform where they can do that in form of a podcast, as you mentioned as well. And Thomas was actually already on our podcast. And we have a big community of later stage startups in Switzerland, and we want to interview them, hear about their learnings, their insights, and share it with everybody that would like to hear it, and also have other kinds of community events to really bring them together and so that everybody can learn from each other. And Impact Hub is another form of community, I would say. We're a co-working space, but we are a community-driven co-working space. So we are for everybody that needs a space, not only physically, but also in other types. So with support, learning programs for activists, entrepreneurs, everybody that wants to join us, basically. And we also have an amazing community management here sitting in the room, if you're interested to learn
Hands
more.
up from people from Impact Hub here. Wonderful. So keep an eye on them. Later in the networking, you might want to tap on that.
Yeah, where we also have over 800 founders in there as well. And then female founders came out of Impact Hub. We founded it 4 years ago to support aspiring female entrepreneurs in Switzerland through various formats, programs, but also events, workshops, and just giving them tools to succeed in this entrepreneurial jungle.
Still a very, very huge gap to close in that sense. For those who might remember one of the previous episodes, we had Hilda Lisvani here from WeBloom, and she showed us statistics that currently all the VC money is going into female-led founders startup are only 2%. So only 2% of the money goes into female-led startups, and that's a big gap we need to close. So also with organizations like Female Founders, we hope to get there very, very soon. So communities, the importance of the communities. I want to start with this first topic because we've seen before in the statistics, startups do see in the end if they failed that this was one of the elements why they failed. Why are communities so important for a startup to have? I want to go backwards and start with you, Merle, because you mentioned it before physically, but also in wider spheres. Why are communities important from your perspective?
I think they're extremely important. I see a lot of startups really find a lot of value from the community that they enter. And that could be either from a topic or from a stage or wherever they find people. And I like to call it actually a supporting circle, also a community, because I think if you find people that you can learn from, that you can share your insights with, your problems, your challenges, and you understand that you're not the only one. Other people have gone through it. You can learn from them. It brings you, like you said, not only faster but further. And I think it also gives you a sense of motivation and morale to be part of a community, and it's extremely valuable to exchange and grow your network.
Sounds ideal at first, right? Like,
Right.
it's, why shouldn't anyone be engaging with communities? From a maybe angel investor perspective, Thomas, is that something angel investors look out for or should look out for when you seek a startup, that they have a community built around?
I mean, for people that start to invest, it's not fun to invest alone, be the only investor in startup. Because if something doesn't go very well, you're the only one to save it, right? So, I mean, I never start stuff alone, always start stuff in a team. I also never invest alone, I always look for co-investors. And one thing is just because, I mean, you have your view of the world and you think this is great, right? But if you have 5 other people which also think it's great, it's maybe much better than if just you think it's great and maybe everybody else does not. So in the end, it's a support that is vital for you, but also once you don't have the time or not the capacity to do something, then the rest of the network, which is on the same mission, actually can back you up, and they can even bring it much further. I mean, just think about if you have 5 people in a room and each of them has their own network. I mean, they can reach out to their network. So 5 networks of 5 people is so much more stronger than 1 network of 1 person. And I always try to find people complementary to me. So I don't need other IT guys on the due diligence case if it's about IT or security, but maybe I want to have a marketing and a legal guy and some business developers, all the things that the startup will also need. And for our investors, doing the first step alone, they're very unsure how it works to invest. They have tons of questions. If you invest as a community, you always can ask a more experienced person. So for most people, they would not invest at all if they did it alone. Even so they read all the books and looked at all the resources online, they still wouldn't do it because they don't trust themselves enough to actually the first step. In a community, it's a joint effort. It's nobody to blame for. It's the whole group that goes in. So it's not this guy has failed. It's the whole group tried. And if it works, it's great for the whole group. If it doesn't work, okay, we try again.
Yeah.
So it's also emotional support, not just knowledge and network.
Yeah.
And that's why it's so important. Yeah.
To not feel the burden resting on just only one's shoulders, but also to have other people to rely on. And
you help each other. It's quid pro quo. You don't pay each other. It's not professional services. It's really, once I give something, then I take something. Often you give first before you take. That's the Swiss attitude. You don't go in and say, I want this because you're a great community. You go first, okay, I can offer you this and you want it. And once you have given 3 times, you take the first time, right? And then they know you and they trust you. And then you get much more than you could have asked for if you just went in straight and said, you're the community I need from you. I mean, when you approach an investor, don't say in the first sentence you want money. Because then you haven't connected. The guy is not even interested in you, and just it's a weirdo. It's like a beggar. Why would he come to me and ask for money if he doesn't even know me? Come on, that's very weird, right? So connect first, yeah.
Yeah, from a Swiss startup perspective, Isabelle, because through Sanborn and also through SDS Venture, what are the things you see the most where people really benefit from the community? What are those moments where you see Swiss founders saying, oh, wow, okay, that was really helpful. I'm so happy to be in this community. These are the things I can take away from. What are the concrete topics they can walk away from as a benefit?
I think from a founder's perspective, I went to graduate school. Most of my friends ended up in consulting and banking. You confront problems as a founder that you didn't believe would happen, right? I don't know. I think it's on the podcast with Merle, like extremes, like police at the door, or, oh, your co-founder left. So, these very extreme life situations which define your startup success to one point on how you navigate them. It helps to have people around you that are experiencing similar things, like, oh, my co-founder left. Even as an investor today, we see this happen more and more often. But if you're not part of this community and you don't have people to talk to out of this community as an entrepreneur, you don't know that this is normal because you think it's very abnormal, especially in Switzerland, where our community of founders is still growing and And there's a lot of your personal community that is not in this founder circle. The other thing is the golden cage problem in Switzerland. So in a job like Google, I guess you earn, well, the paycheck is high. So as there is a post-it on my wall that says overhead is death, right? So as a founder, you also have to understand what it does mean to be lean. And sometimes this exchange on how you think about money, how you grow wealth, how you also can have less fixed cost. This is something that you can discuss in the community better. So these are like just very concrete examples for founders that I've seen, which we exchange on often. The other thing is, for those of you that are thinking about getting access to networks, is how do we get to know these people, right? Often when you found, your friends are not founders, so you have to get into these networks. And something like what Merle has to offer with Impact Hub, these founder stories, these help because you get to know founders that are in the room at the cocktail hour. So I would encourage you to get into these networks. Also investors, like Thomas said, approach them, talk to them the first time, and ask for money 2 years later. So this is important in Switzerland, to go to these focused events, because the larger, broader society is not in the entrepreneurial mindset.
Yeah, you can stretch the thought a little bit and say, look, the way how we learn at college and university are subjects to, in order to put you in some department of a larger corporation, right? Entrepreneurship as a whole is usually maybe one semester in one module, right? And that can fairly be more expanded. Because obviously it's not just one semester or one module. So you mentioned it's harder to get the right people to open up, and then it takes them longer to build the trust, right? So now, Urs, let's do a little bit of time travel as well as location travel. How is it over there in the US, especially when you look back when you started at employee number 8 and you picture yourself around in that ecosystem? How was it there? How would you describe it?
I mean, I'm actually glad that we're talking about community. First of all, sorry for creating problems. We'll half the Googler salary tomorrow, and then we take that half and we're going to invest it in angel startups to solve that problem. No, but I actually think it's really underestimated how important it is. Sometimes, it's easy to think of, especially in retrospect, of startups as something that's a technical, brilliant idea or a brilliant business model, but it's actually a people problem, and in fact, a people success. I came to Google by accident, really, because other people told me about it, and I ignored the first one, but I didn't ignore the second one, and it was completely, it feels completely accidental. But if these accidents sort of happen systematically, then you get the kind of network effect that Silicon Valley is famous for. And I think, actually, thanks to all of your work, when Google came to Zurich, I mean, many of you may not remember how it was, but 20 years ago, Zurich had no startup community at all. Right, and more or less no startups either, right? So in that sense, if you look at it in that time frame, it's really been an amazing development, and it makes me very, very optimistic to kind of say, gee, if in 20 years this kind of difference is possible, then just imagine from this starting point what the next 20 years do, because in network effects are an exponential thing, right? So the first 20 years got you this much, next 20 years should actually get much, much further if that community exists and if that network exists. And so to some extent, I often think of Silicon Valley not as a tech hub, but actually a people hub. And what makes it amazing is that you need, 10 people and one of this person, one of this skill set and one of that skill set. Like, you can actually find them within just one relatively small area, and the acceleration you get from that is really immense, and not just employees, but advice, right? And so I think this here is exactly the right thing, and you're all actually doing something very smart by participating in it, and very valuable by actually really trying to boost it, because in the long run is probably the most important thing that has made Silicon Valley successful, and hopefully will make Zurich successful as well. I mean, not that it's not successful already, but startups in Switzerland and in Zurich even more successful.
Can you describe as a little momentary scene, like from, let's say, 25 years ago when Google was still like the startup it was, when you were engaging with community? Give us a little bit of a description of how that was and how the community responded also to.
I mean, back then, actually, the even in Silicon Valley, it was less organized than probably it is here in Zurich already, in the sense that the community was kind of very informal. There weren't actually as many angel networks because, well, there were, but then they all died in 2000, right? So it was still, but actually, it was exactly that same effect in the sense that, like, why. Where was our first data center, right? It was actually where the guys at Yahoo, who you personally knew, had their data center, and you get a reference sort of that way, right? Like all these little things are actually what what really accelerates sort of your time to solution for an individual problem. And I think a lot of it was social. I don't know how it is here in Zurich, but actually, versus having formal clubs, you actually knew where people were hanging out, and so actually a lot of it happened over whatever drinks, sports, whatever the event was, and that actually, if you want. Word of mouth at the time, no social networks, no mobile phones. Yes, mobile phones, but with phone numbers and ringtones, downloadable ringtones. So really, that actually was a big part of networking. Was really the physically being in the same place. That's, I think, a little bit less important today, but still, actually, this accidental one, at least for me, maybe I'm too old, is actually more effective than LinkedIn networking or something like that. I mean, it's great too, but it's not. These are two different animals, so to speak, and they actually have very different dynamics.
Yeah. What I hear a little bit also is the underlying cultural part, right? Like the Californian culture versus, we heard examples now, the Swiss mentality is very much is like, here's my problem, I'm trying to solve it. I already did the KPI calculation and oh, shall we go for a beer together? And whereas there, it starts more casually.
Yeah,
it sounds.
Maybe. I mean, I think Switzerland has actually changed in that respect too. Again, like 20 years ago, like none of this was just unthinkable, right? To have this discussion, right? Actually, you would have had a panel of middle-aged men, probably, talking about innovation and
SMBs.
Yes, something. Yes,
No.
yes, SMB, good word. Yes, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Startup wasn't even a term, probably.
That's what we had proven doesn't work.
So I want to shift gears a little bit. So now we understand. Okay, obviously there is value to be drawn from a community, but what we hear a lot from the audiences and me myself as well, what I experience is that engaging with those communities. First of all, picking the right communities is a challenge, and then the engagement with the community is another challenge. So Thomas, we had a good conversation about that prior to today. What is a right way to engage in a community?
I guess first you have to pick the right community, and you need to know what you want to get out of it and why it's this one, not another one. I mean, especially as an entrepreneur, there's a lot of entrepreneurial communities. There's international ones which have chapters here. There's local ones. There's one which is very specific to what you're doing, like just for fintech startups, there's a cluster. For health tech, there's a cluster. The question is, okay, what is the thing that you need the most? Is it more like you want to bounce ideas, or is it more like you want access to customers, or access to talent you want to hire, or access to investors, or you just want to meet random people and have fun? I mean, be really clear about why you pick this, not the other community. And before you fully join, I would just talk to some of the members, like, hey, why are we there? Tell me about what's happening. But sometimes what's on the website is not what's happening in these communities, actually. And when you talk to the people that are active, you learn much more what it's really about, because in the end, it's not about what's on the website and what the mission is. It's about the people in that community which are active. There's quite large communities where people are not active, maybe 5% or less are active. I mean, I'm also an ETH alumni, but I don't really know what they do. I mean, now they built a knowledge network. Great, I was one of the first users, and now I still don't really understand what they want to do, even though they have thousands of people there, which is amazing. And everybody has a great network, but they couldn't leverage it. So, yeah, really like find out what the people do that are there. And then once you go there, first, don't talk too much, just listen, ask questions, just to understand what's going on. And once you really understand what's there, but you want to really engage, then, yeah, be a little more outspoken. I think, yeah, you need to test the waters, and in the end, you need to build trust with the people in the network, and they need to trust you. Same thing with investors. If I don't trust the founder, why would I give him $1 million? I mean, I don't want to do charity. I want to invest in the people I trust, right? And I don't want to be the only ones. I need to build trust with several investors. And that's vital. And trust building takes time. It's like relationship building. You don't go there, it's the love of your life and you marry the same day in a chapel. That's not the Swiss attitude here. You need to build relationships over multiple times, right? And that's how communities become really strong, because they know you, you know them, and you're like, yeah, linked. And the link continues even if you don't are in the same room anymore.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, various cultural studies shows that that's the way Swiss business is being conducted, right? It's more longevity, but it takes longer time also to build up. But the trust eventually is also on a stronger level.
Yeah, and if you want to get to the really cool opportunities, it comes through the network. It doesn't come through the official events. I mean, the best opportunities always have at the upper or after the event, and not on stage or in the limelight. And that's just how it works, right? On the limelight is typical stuff which is a little already like very well proven, and yeah, basically it's a little too late to engage, right? Because should have known 2 years before.
Yeah, maybe to build on to this is also interesting, from the network effects. You talked about serendipity, you talked about very organized approaches. One thing that I always notice that helps entrepreneurs is there's these weak links. There's people that know people in very different ecosystems. And these people can extremely helpful for your personal growth, for your startup growth, also identify them. Like, for example, Thomas, if Thomas says yes to a startup, it's like a domino effect with other angel investors. So it's like a positive signal. But I even witnessed now with another startup, they just had an investor. I've never heard of them, but he just opened such fantastic, interesting doors. So pay attention also to these people that are maybe outside core communities, but still can really support you to get into something interesting and something new.
Mm-hmm. Or maybe from your perspective, can you bring it to maybe a real life example where a problem you can talk about openly, which we couldn't have solved had we not had a community to reach out to, and what would that be?
Sure. And just as a brief follow-up, I think that actually, having to be more deliberate here, it might be sort of one of the remaining taxes, if you want, on a Swiss startup versus Silicon Valley, because the density isn't quite there where this just happens automatically, right? And I think a truly dense network, all of these things can be much more implicit, and you kind of do them without noticing, because everyone around you is connected to everyone else, and there's so many people where you can sort of do it wrong, and actually, you only need 1 of 10, right? And there's 10. Whereas here in Switzerland, maybe there's only 2, and you have to be more deliberate. So I think please pay attention to what Thomas says.
It's more like a village here. Everybody knows everybody.
Yeah, maybe in New Zealand, yes. Exactly, yes. They speak of 2 degrees of separations in New Zealand, and it's actually kind of true. So to answer your question, actually, I'll take an example from security that Thomas might be. I'm sure we'll remember. Actually, the security community is across companies actually incredibly important as a community, right? It's almost like a completely independent sort of network than the official partnerships between companies, etc. Because often when you have a significant security incident, sort of the response to it is not aligned with company boundaries. And it's also not managed by company managers, right? It's actually much more peer-to-peer. And to give you an example, 5 years ago, maybe, for those of you who remember the first, big CPU vulnerabilities were, side channel attacks in Intel, like in every CPU in the world, basically, discovered at Google and independently by some researchers in Linz, Austria. And it was probably 6-7 months between the discovery of this and the accidental publication. It went out a few days too early. But in between, what actually solved a gigantic problem was a informal network of people who knew each other and trusted each other, right? It was incredibly sensitive, right? It was a relatively small group, but it needed hardware, it needed operating system, it needed, compilers. Like, it was not something that any company could actually solve independently. And it was really an amazing sort of demonstration of the power of networks. And if you looked at any kind of directory, you would not find that. It's not a formal network, right? Here's the hardware bugs response network, right? Please join it if you're interested, right? Like, it's not how it worked, right? It was completely ad hoc because the bug, like every bug is different, and the combination you need is sort of different. And so that, I think, is a great example, and I think many security people will tell you how important the network is, because that's how Google and Microsoft can talk without talking, right? I am sure there's someone today talking about something very sensitive security-wise with someone, let's say, at Microsoft, and I don't know, right? And maybe actually nobody else knows at Google, and that's important, right? Because officially, this is not the time to notify Microsoft, but I need to ask this one question, and I can trust that I can ask this person this question without Microsoft knowing, right? Even though they're at Microsoft, I'm at Google. That's really sort of the power of network. And I'm sure there's other places too, but it always struck me that in the security domain, this was very, very strong and really essential. Like, it could not work without that.
Yeah, this mutual understanding of vulnerability to each other, despite the company's mission and vision that there's something larger at hand to be solved. With a different angle, Merle, because through Swisspreneur, right, you have very intimate conversations with the founders through the podcast, right? So, but that allows you to see certain things where they go through and certain challenges, right? What are 2 or 3 topics which you keep hearing about where you're like, gosh, if you were just talking to each other about this, it could be solved a little bit easier? Like, what are some of the topics you hear?
So many. I think I actually just really liked what you said about this sharing failure or being vulnerable. I feel like this is something that at some point I always get to this topic with the interviewees where they said like, oh God, then I really felt like there was so much pressure on me and I didn't know how to handle it, but I couldn't really show it because I could not look weak because investors were counting on me, my team was counting on me, especially for the founders. And then I'm always in the situation where I think, oh, you should talk to XYZ. He had the exact same thing, but of course I cannot just share that they were in a similar situation. And I often think, why don't we talk about this more often? That it's really hard, it's really tough, and that's okay, because you will come through it, or you will come out at the other end, and you will learn from it. This is definitely something that I would love just to have a bit more open discussion about. You
should fund Founders Anonymous. Like, you go to this location, you sit in a circle, and you say, I have a problem, I am a founder.
Welcome.
I have a term sheet to fill out.
Yes, exactly. No, I think I don't know if this is also a cultural thing, could be. I don't know, maybe it's different in the US. I'm not sure. But
no, I think it's just inherently very hard.
Yeah, to talk about failure, you mean? Yeah, I guess it is.
Or to admit. So for background, I don't know. I hope you've heard of blameless postmortems. If not, search for it. it's in the SRE book, etc. It's actually a big part at Google of how you deal with problems, and, past problems, failures. And the blameless is incredibly important. And that actually is easier to establish than admitting weakness sort of in the moment, right? Because that kind of says, I don't know how to solve it, versus blameless postmortem says, well, I know what I did wrong. And I think I know what I should do to not repeat that, right? So in that sense, that's even easier. And even that is actually very hard. And I've seen many cultures at customers now with Google Cloud. You go a lot to other places. They're struggling with that a lot. And you cannot have innovation without failure. And if you don't permit yourself to sort of make that okay, that really means you cannot succeed. But then to some extent, what you said is actually much harder, right? Because you actually kind of say, I am a failure right now. And of course you're not, right? But like I have a problem that I don't know the answer to, and it's just really, really very hard. And I'm sure we all experienced that. And actually I said before, the first time someone told me about Google, I didn't follow up. And the reason was I knew it was a search engine. I actually used it. I knew nothing about search, right? So actually, I don't really have anything to offer to a startup like Google. I'm sure they're cool. I'm sure they're going to be successful or whatever, right? But it's not me because I don't actually have relevant skills, right?
You very gently pivoted actually to my last topic, failure culture, right? So hugely important in curating a community, because I think with vulnerability comes trust, right? And if we were to only have communities where everyone is just talking about their successes only and showing off, I mean, basically it's just another version of social media, right? Where everyone uploads their best selfies. But that's not the case with communities, right? Like that, the whole point of a community is show vulnerability. Thomas, you are sometimes in very, let's say, sensitive moments of a startup where exactly that, because they're being stress tested through their angels investors on their vulnerability and where they might potentially fail. What are things you see from founders where they could show vulnerability, but they make the fall for the false habit of trying to show their strength, but it would actually be helpful to be more vulnerable in that case? What are scenarios you hear a lot about?
I mean, there's a lot of insecurity and uncertainty at the very beginning of a journey of a startup. I mean, you don't know it's the right team. You don't know whether customers will love it. For investors, the worst moment is typically when the founder doesn't address the issues they have. And only once the issue is too big, that thing can only crash, they come and ask for help. And then they say, look, I mean, if you had told me 6 months ago, we could have organized a bridge financing round. But if you tell me you don't have salary for this month for the employees, and basically you're already like in the deep red zone of not being able to pay the taxes and stuff, basically you're already a criminal, basically, according to Swiss law, if you're in the board. Because if you can't pay the taxation, you pay privately out of pocket of the board members, not from the startup anymore. And that's like stupid. So if you see the house is burning, don't wait until the whole house is burning. Come when you see the first smoke. And then often people are very much willing to help and give you guidance and even give you a second chance. But if you hide it for too long, then you actually misuse the trust. And if trust breaks, there's zero support, right? So rather talk early about the smoke and the small fires before the big one comes.
Having to create a little bit of a guidance here, because obviously it sounds so obvious when you say it like that, right? But if I'm trying to put myself in the shoes of founders there, right? Because you fight so many battles day by day, so that becomes almost like a mechanic out of your character that you say, like, I gotta show up with strengths. It's not even a deliberate choice that they don't want to show vulnerability, but sometimes they miss the moment, right? So how can they reflect on themselves that to say, maybe this is something I should flag to the community?
I think an issue is that, at least in Switzerland, we have this culture reputation. It's very important. Failure is not an option. You need to be perfect. If you're not perfect and don't know what you do, you don't do it, right? Now, startup is the opposite. It's try and error. Nobody knows whether it works. If you don't try it, you cannot win. But if you try it, you can also lose, right? And I think overcoming that, I mean, most people which are startup founders, they're like experts, heroes, gurus, go-to persons, like they really are great. But now they go into uncharted waters. They come into a storm which they've never seen before. They have issues, for example, with people they hire, which they didn't even anticipate that they could have issues, because they always, in the past, when they were starting to do research, whatever, they never had these type of issues, or they start to feel a burnout, and they cannot admit that they have limits, right? So showing weakness is difficult. You can show it to trusted people very easily, or to your best friends, or whatever, your relatives, but it's hard to show it to people which you don't have a really strong trust to. And especially if you depend on these people that they're going to help you out of this vulnerability, it's even harder, right? And that's a little vicious cycle. So often I see founders running that issue that, yeah, they just feel they need to be perfect, which nobody is, but they feel they have to. And they also cannot show weakness towards the employees or towards investors because they feel they have to be perfect. Now, the best dialogue is always if anytime something comes across, you just address it. Because if you do it often with the small issues, then you will not have an issue to address a big issue. Because you know they help me with the small hiccups, they're also going to help me with the bigger hiccup, right? But if you don't do it for too long and try to be perfect and remove all the negativity from the reports, sometimes I only hear the highlights. And my question is always, okay, I first want to hear the downlights before I talk about the highlights, right? And I say, what, really? You want to hear the failures and the issues and that we just fired the guy we just hired a month ago? You want to hear that? I said, yes. That's the thing I'm really interested in, the highlights. That's cool. But I can only help you if I know what's not working.
I think one thing that may help, I think both as individuals, if you're struggling with that, but also as advisors, is to not actually frame it as weakness, but as it's actually very important to know what you're good at and what you're not good at, right? And it's actually, even if you are a Nobel Prize winner, right? If it's the first time you play tennis, you're actually bad at it, right? And the smart people and the best person ask for a tennis coach, right? If they want to be good at tennis, right? And so actually knowing that, like, it's actually a strength to say, I'm a great whatever, right? Scientist. I'm not a great finance person and I need help. Can you help me, right? That actually, like, if someone did that to me, I would say that's maturity, right? That's not weakness, right? But I think getting people into that mindset of knowing you can be a great person and not be great at something, that's actually normal. And if you don't know that, then you have a problem, right? Because you overestimate what you do. And I actually kind of wonder, Merle, whether you saw that in people in retrospect. They said, no, I should have asked for help because it actually was sort of objectively obvious that I should not do this alone.
Yeah, for sure. And I think also it comes a bit back to the engagement part that we talked about at the beginning, because if you engage in the community, you also build up, not only they trust you, but also you trust them. And usually, if you are strategic about the communities that you're in, these are people that are in similar spaces, may that be in a similar field, industry, or in a similar stage. So they probably have been through the similar things that you have, and then you start sharing these things and you grow from that. And I think also leading by example and saying, having this maturity and this strength of saying, I have failed at that, and that's why I need support, and this is going well, and I've spoken to my investors about it. You lead by example, and then the others follow, and I think that's extremely important.
And even better would be not I have failed at it, but I will fail if I try to do this myself, right? Just without help, right? Because that actually would be the best, the pre-mortem, right? Is like, no,
mature and wise.
I'm not going to die.
Yeah.
I love that in very few moments of the dialogue, we pivoted to the paradigm shift, understanding that failure is a strength, and admitting it shows actually the strength and the power of self-reflection, but also the openness for feedback. And that's one thing, Isabelle, I would love to really attribute it to you, because for all the conversation we had before, right? We talked about it very openly with the two different cultural hats you had, with the American and Swiss culture you grew up with, both, right? You bring this across so naturally, also because you come from a family from entrepreneurship. So what is the advice you would give people next time they come across failure? Something I see a lot, and you speak about a lot also in podcasts, like how to deal with failure culture, with also a little bit of a Swiss angle.
I think I can just lead on to what has been already told. I think the most important thing is that as a person, all of us have to talk about what is not going well, right? And I like what you said, just hit it off first. So this is also something I do with the startups, that you just bring it out there and have a very natural conversation, because then you mirror it to the other person. And when you think that stuff is not going well, you know, when as a founder we can't get up in the morning because we're burnt out or our energy is low, we have overrun ourselves. So also as a founder, maybe something that we haven't talked about in failure culture is be aware of who you are, what your strengths are, but also where you are emotionally, because sometimes that you put yourself too much in a motor role. And I feel like also in Switzerland, we're a bit more like distanced to our emotional self, while Americans are maybe more, and I don't know how to put it. It's just a bit a different way to talk about emotions. And this can also help be a key to circumvent failure. Not circumvent would be the wrong word, but to address it early enough so that you find solutions. And these discussions are needed because you have rational discussions most of the time, but we lack the emotional discussions with our peers to check in. That would be maybe something to add to the round.
Great. Before we jump to the questions from the audience, let's hold ourselves accountable here then in a real quick last question. What is one thing you would say, I really struggle with that, and I could get some help right now, but it's hard to talk about?
I can actually start, because when we were briefed for this panel, we were told to find a fun fact about ourselves. And I struggled a lot with finding a fun fact about myself, so I asked ChatGPT what could be a fun fact, and then the things that ChatGPT listed made me feel so bad because I couldn't tick any of them. So I don't know which coach helps with fun facts, but this is definitely something. I think it's just like this, being aware of things that you've done and that are fun facts that may, for me, just be boring information about myself. That could be interesting for other people, and I don't know, presenting myself that way. That is something I definitely struggle with.
And the underlying struggle is actually feeling imposters, right? Like that something which could be.
Hans. Yeah.
I'm poking a little bit because we're talking about vulnerability. But thank you very much for sharing. Yeah, and I think a lot of the audience feel exactly that, right? Like, what have I possibly done that could be entertaining of some sort?
Yeah. Don't use ChatGPT for that. It's awful.
Gemini is pretty cool. Yeah.
Smooth. That was good.
Yeah, so I mean, talking about things where I struggle, and currently have a private project where I struggle a little bit. I built a family house in the last 2.5 years. It should have been a smart home. Now everything is connected, lots of tech in it, all the signals are there, but it's actually very stupid. It doesn't really know how we use it and how we want to use it. And I talk to all the specialists, and they all tell me, yeah, I can help you with one thing out of the 10 things I want to connect, but nobody can connect it for me. And it's really, I mean, I'm a computer science guy, so now I've started to build my own solution to it, but it's frustrating.
You need AI, Thomas.
Yeah, it's really frustrating. So I would love to have a self-learning house that understands how it's used and optimizes it for the users, right? And not just for the photovoltaics guy that wants to charge my car during sunlight. I mean, come on, that's not smart. So that's the thing I struggle with. And what I struggled a lot when I was younger was speaking in front of an audience. I was super afraid because I always thought somebody will ask the one question I cannot answer. And then like, oh, I'm the idiot on stage, right? And to get across that barrier to be able to speak in front of the audience, I just said, okay, now, in addition to my computer science studies, I just learned how to teach. And then I did lots of classes, and I was always standing in front of students. And after doing it like 100 times, suddenly it felt very natural and even enjoyed it in the end. And that's the thing I was, in my grammar school, I was so afraid when I had to go in front of the class. So the thing you don't like, just do it often enough until you actually like it, yeah? It was tough. It took me like 3 years or so to start to learn to speak also freely. I always was learning it by heart, all my speeches. I don't do that anymore. Just push yourself out of comfort zone and learn to swim, right? And but it's tough. The first 2-3 years, it was really tough. I thought I would never get there.
Mm. And it again takes courage to admit it. And yet you're here now on stage, giving people advice how to speak. So I think good evidence. Yeah. So Isabelle.
I think there's a few things I struggle with. On a personal level, being overwhelmed is a regular revisitor of my job life, and I really like to change stuff, build communities, and we have so much great things going on. So on a personal level, this was very, like, April was terrible. End of April, I was just like, thank you, April. I'm finished with you. And I think that adheres to saying no to some projects, to being comfortable by letting go, that you cannot participate in some of the things that you're working on. And the other thing that comes with it a bit is then finding just great people to collaborate with, talking about networks. This has really helped me also move through these situations a bit better while still driving these changes that we want. But I think that's an honest answer with what I still struggle with again and again.
Yeah.
For me, it's actually being an engineer in the sense that, like I went to ETH, we had electrical engineering, and so you think you should be good at actually fixing things like hand-eye coordination or like soldering something or whatever, doing something non-trivial with your bike, and I'm terrible at that actually, and I don't have the patience to get good, I think, somehow, and so that as an engineer, that is something that is hard to admit, that actually you're not a good engineer, you're not that kind of engineer.
Yeah,
especially given that I do hardware too, in another sense of hardware. But don't let me close to your bench, your lab bench.
Yeah. So if you have to build a bench for the next server rooms, you have other people.
Yes. Pick someone else. Yes.
Great. I mean, it wouldn't be fair if I wouldn't close it off with a quick story. I think mine one is really the inbox. Right. These days, I feel like when I talk to people, that inbox which never empties, and that one email you have dragged on forever. And what I've learned here also from a few colleagues is like, and the network effect comes to play here so greatly, is to say, even if it's a one-liner, say like, I can't get back to you this week, I'll try my best next week, and suddenly it opens up so much more trust. They hear back from you, and it's a simple thing I've been dragging for so long. So anyways, it shouldn't turn into a...
That's really terrible. That's a basic skill. How could you not?
Yeah, zero inbox is... I wake up and there's...
Isn't it called zero inbox, right? I learned it from Urs when I was at Google.
Man.
It's another concept we talk about. Anyways, thank you very much for the vulnerability before it turns into a self-help group on stage. Let's move back to the questions. Yeah, so we do have about, as I say, promised before, a few questions we can pick here. And hopefully all have been posted quite regularly. So here the first question: what can a fresh head of IT infrastructure do to make a real difference to the organization? I'll let anyone pick that question, but I think there's a bit of a bias here.
So I think it's actually, the bane of my career, so to speak, is that your job is to be invisible in a certain way, right? Infrastructure actually should not exist in people's minds, so to speak. And so one of the most important things when you do infrastructure is that actually to just realize it's actually not directly important. It's there for a reason. Infrastructure is not important. The outcome you create with infrastructure is important, right? So why are you doing it, right? What is really the problem to solve? And that's sometimes because you love infrastructure, right? Like you're head of infrastructure, whatever, right? This is your life. It's actually very hard to kind of remind yourself, actually, it's not at all about that. And it really is about what the infrastructure is for. And sometimes that means actually giving up things that worked in the past and are actually great technical solutions, but they don't fit the problem that you actually now have. And so giving up your beautiful infrastructure, that actually is sort of a key skill. And also, I used to say, especially, actually I said it as little as, 5 years ago, often, good enough is good enough, right? Like you when you are in a situation, especially in a startup, and you have your top 10 list, and here's problem number 1 that you're working on, and you know the correct solution, right? But actually, probably what you need is the hack that gets it from number 1 to number 11, right? Because then you move on to number 2, and it's more important to do that, right? So good enough is good enough, right? Like get it out of the top list of problems. And then you probably will have to come back later. And actually, even with your perfect solution, that would just take another week to do it perfectly. In fact, will turn out it was not perfect, right? So good enough is actually one of the things that infrastructure is very, very important, because you stop improving it when your problem is solved, or is solved well enough, and then you go on to enable the next outcome.
We did a quick switch on the screen now for the next question. So help me a little bit for the person who have posted the question. So here goes. Kickstart. Where to find monetary support, salary or daily life, to find time implementing a prototype, especially we focus on the new AI generation, to convince co-founders, VCs, angels and banks, in a form of a loan, to be granted pre-seed. So that was a bit of a heavy question, but 8 people upvoted it. So I guess the point here is, where to find monetary support and then to implement a prototype. And
also co-founders, or no?
And there was a lot in there.
Yeah, there was a very packed question.
No
I mean, you could have posted 2 questions.
Should we start with co-founders?
Let's start with co-founders, yeah.
I think co-founders are hard to find, but what I would start is just looking in your network of people. Who did you like to work with in the past? Who did you like to study with? Who is complementary to your skill set? Like, you have to know yourself personally. Like, what is your Achilles? Where are you terrible at? And look for these people, meet with them, work with them like for 3 months, and see can we kick it off. There are events, there are formats for this. And one format that I saw a lot of people come out with a team is hackathons. That's a good version, like for a weekend, getting the idea going.
Yeah, like also we have the Climathon. That's really like a 24-hour, 48-hour, something long, where you build teams. And I think what you said is really important, is complementary thing. So either look for people that complement you in skills, or that inspire you, or that you think are simply more intelligent than you are.
I think there was also something about financing in the question, right?
There was something about financing. I'm trying
how to get a loan. And the question is always, is it for a project or is it for a business, right? I mean, getting a loan for doing a project is basically not possible. Why would somebody give you a loan for a project? I mean, if nothing comes back, project is over, and then where's the money coming back, right? So if it all would be a grant, which is not repayable, and there are foundations in Switzerland, there are some awards you can win for great pitches of ideas. I mean, like Venture Kick, for example, has that. So you can win easily 10,000 or 30,000 Swiss francs if you do it very well. But the question is still, is it a project or is it like a business, right? And if you want to do a project, I mean, you can do a research project and you get a grant from universities or from National Science Foundation, or InnoSwiss also does some financings there. So there are public-private partnerships that do that. There's research institutions that do that. But you need to be clear about the purpose. If it's just about you playing with the cool tech and try to do some ChatGPT, chatbot yourself, I mean, basically it's a hobby, it's not a company, right? And so be clear what it is. Is it education? Is it a project? Should it have an impact? Is money coming back? Or is it like a business which you are very serious about? Now, if people tell me, because they work in industry and then I want to have a paid sabbatical for 2 years to try out whether they're a good startupper, say, look, I mean, you're kidding, right? I mean, if you're serious, if you're an entrepreneur, you take the risk yourself before you ask other people to take the risk. So you do it in your spare time. You maybe go back to 60% and work 40% on your startup. And if you're not even willing to take a risk, most likely will never be an entrepreneur which has success, because you not go full in and you don't do the first step, right? And investors never do the first step. They follow the entrepreneurs, but they don't go first.
And that's, by the way, a big advantage of software startups today. You don't need much money, you need time, right? And so time you can pay yourself. And, that means making compromises elsewhere, of course. But it used to be that actually, like, capital was really the first thing, because you needed to buy servers and stuff like that, right? So today, that's why biotech, for example, is much harder, because you need labs and stuff, right? And actually, so the hurdle for getting to your insight that actually this doesn't work, right? That hurdle is costly already. And the beauty of software is that may mean you wasted your time, but you didn't actually need someone else's money, right? Because the hardest part to ask for someone's money is when you have nothing, right? And so in software, you can put in time and then you actually have something, and then it's much easier.
So the hurdle is lower. But speaking of money, the next question here is there a gap in funding opportunities for startups in Switzerland trying to jump from pre-seed to seed or pre-seed/seed to Series A?
I mean, you can read the statistics from the Swiss Venture Capital Report, and you saw that we had 4 billion venture capital in 2022. 2023 was 2.6 billion, so 38% less. Now, most growth financing money does not come from within Switzerland. About 85% of the 4 billion came from abroad. So typically you do the pre-seed and the seed here, and if you go for Series A, 5 million plus, you go abroad. And you can only go abroad if you have something to show. So you need customers, revenues, reputation, people that trust you, right? So you need to be ready, and you should do it quick. You cannot take 10 years to have the first customer or the first 1 million in turnover. If you're too slow, the impatient VCs will not give you the money because they assume it's going to take you another 20 years to make the 10 million revenues, and they cannot wait so long because their fund is time limited. They invest between 3 and 5 years, and then they want to sell for the next 3 to 5 years. So if they cannot quadruple what they give you, they will never give you anything because they have to pay the losses of the other investments, they get back nothing. So time is important. You should only start when you know what to do and that you can be really quick in scaling up. So don't do a research project the first 5 years with the first million from angels. Makes nobody happy, not even you, because then the VC says you're too late, you're not a company.
Maybe the other thing is that don't wait until you need funding, because in a way you should always be making those connections. I mean, that's part of the community is also the funders community, and actually raise without raising, right? But so that when it gets to the next step, when you are like when you have something to show and you need money, you actually already have a handful, like your mental list of who the likely people are, and they have some idea of who you are. Might still be hard, but
I mean, the best thing is if investors are waiting to be able to invest. I mean, Deep Charge was such a case, comes out of the ETH from an AI research group. Actually, Thomas Hoffmann is leading it, which is a former Google engineering manager. And so they did a PhD there. Then they built the case. Like in 6 months, it was operational. Then they got 2 law firms onto it. Then they went straight to US. And once they entered US, one of the biggest law firms made some PR for them. And then what happened? Some Californian VCs knocked on the door of the Swiss startup. Hey, please can we invest? Because you have the better tech than anybody out there in legal tech. And the seed round was 10.6 million Swiss francs now, just announced this week. They're not even 3 years old, and they had less than 500,000 of turnover. So it's incredible. They had a couple of lineups of VCs that, please, I want to be the investor because you have the better tech. And they did that because one of the founders on the YouTube channel on the latest and greatest in AI, Yannick Kilchner, fantastic guy. One of the other co-founders was Paulina. She's one of the Forbes 30 under 30. They have been all over PR, all the social media channels. Everybody's watching them. What's the next thing? And everybody's a little bit afraid. If they really make it, they change legal AI.
But not everyone can be like them. So
Sure not.
it's limited value advice. But you should be like them.
Yeah, be a little bit outspoken what to do.
Great. Let's close it off with the last question. Make it a little bit more tangible, because I see a few questions here going into different spheres. But I think that's really relevant for the people today. What are the main resources that a successful community should be able to offer its entrepreneurs in order for them to succeed? Is it an event space?
I mean, people feed off of people. So I think the core is that you have from the different stages of life, from the different stages of growth, the right people in a network that can support others and vice versa. So complementary and good people. So if you're looking at networks, even in Switzerland, there are informal. So the really good networks are informal. So you have to box yourself into them. And it helps if you have somebody that will vouch for you behind closed doors and says, oh, Isabelle's cool, or, you know, Merle is cool, or Thomas is cool, or Urs is cool. Let's invite them in next time. And pay attention again to these people that can bring you in, and then you get access to like a new group of people. I make a really concrete example. Like I'm meeting the CFO of the Rinje Gruppe more often now, also privately, because we connected over business women's lunch. And these are women that are 10 years ahead of my career path, which I really like to connect. And I feel like a little outsider, but that's why I think good networks feed off of good people. And when you want to get into a new one, pay attention how you can get in. And then you can also grow yourself personally. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I think just to add on this, because you are obviously very dynamic in the stages of your startup or your journey generally, so you need different things at different times. So one community may not change with you. So I think it's also really important to understand, what do I need right now at this moment? And then find these people that can open the door for you. So that maybe space at a certain point, or maybe, I don't know, place with Wi-Fi that's working. But maybe later you need the access to money, or you need access to PR or something, depending on where you are at the moment, or heavy, like big industry players that you need access to. And so you kind of, I think basically what I want to say is, what a good community is when it gives you value right at that moment when you need it. And I think because you change, you also need to change your communities from time to time.
I mean, in terms of communities, some of them are very open, anybody can join. Others are very selective. It depends a little what you need. I always would first ask myself, what can I offer to the community before I think about what I need? If I can offer zero and only go there and ask for help, maybe it's not very balanced, right? So often those communities which I got the strongest connection to was communities which were kind of restrictive. So not everybody just gets in because they knock at the door and then they let them in. It's often communities where somebody needs to recommend you to go in, or you need to have certain accomplishments to get in. And then once you're in, you first need to make some contributions before you even start to ask for whatever. And then you basically, you establish your standing in this community, right? And then more and more people get interested, and suddenly you meet people who didn't even know they were in this community, you didn't even know what they had to offer, but suddenly they open the doors for you. The best thing is you get to know people which open the full network of them to you, right? And they would only do so if there's a reason to do so. They don't offer it. A network is precious. To build a strong network, it takes you years and years and years. So you don't want to waste your network by just opening to everybody, because the people in network, they also don't want to answer to any request. I mean, often have LinkedIn requests like, hey, Thomas, 15,000 people on LinkedIn, please make an introduction to XYZ because you're connected. I say, great, and who are you? Right? I mean, it doesn't work that way. And I cannot spoil my network because the network is precious and the people have also limited time. So I'm kind of selective on who I can help and who I cannot help, even though, of course, everybody wants help. It's impossible to help everybody. And think about that. It also is opportunity cost if they help you, not somebody else. So make it worse that they help you and not somebody else, right?
It's actually really input is output, right? The sum of the network. If you benefit, then someone else has to produce that benefit, right? So it's a symmetric kind of thing. And so in a certain way, the answer, the meta answer to this is, well, what is the requirement for members of the network, right? And in that, actually, collectively is the value that it provides.
And I just want to add one more thing, because communities are networking and not everybody likes networking, which is fair enough. What I have learned works wonders is get a wing woman or a wingman, whatever you prefer, somebody that really likes talking to people and can take you with them And that also opens a lot of doors, just for the introverts among us.
I love that you covered that part also, because exactly that was a burning question to me as well for introverts, how to engage with that. We saw before the map, before everyone here at 253 communities, at least mapped out through SICTIC. All of them have a website. You can find out what they offer, whether it's, for example, the SICTIC Angel Investor Report, where you get information, whether it is actually, and this is a nice segue to some podcasts where you can find information, right? So there is access versus, 25 years ago, where you literally have to find the pub, the club where people are hanging out with. There is desk research you can do before you engage. And then once you do that, however, as we have learned now, is really understanding what you can give and what you can expect from that community, and by doing so, balance out the community and your contribution to do so.
Can I make a request? Talking about podcasts, if anybody knows Roger Federer, let us know, because we're trying to get him on the podcast for a long time now.
I know his kids, they went with my kids in the same school.
Oh.
Okay, network effect, here we go, yes.
Beauty of connections.
Yeah, I think he qualifies as an entrepreneur now as well for the founder story. So, we can work together.
Then we can, okay, cool.
I like that. Cool. Great. And this is how it happens. Ladies and gentlemen, it was a pleasure again having you here today. And for those who think one thing we forgot, we didn't, it's the selfie. But today with such a high caliber panelist, I would like to take the selfie with all of you. But for the rest of the audience, thank you very much. A question we get all the time, how can you jumpstart with Google Cloud? This is the program you can sign up for. Again, another community we offer from our house here to all of you. But to the rest of the panelists, I would say, dear, thank you very much for your time, for your insights, your vulnerability, and thank you very much. And now we're going to go upstairs afterwards. So for those who have already picked up their badge, please follow my colleagues they lead you to the elevator to our networking, where we do have beers and pizza to connect over. But if you don't have your badge, pick it up from one of the Googlers. And thank you very much for joining today. And once again, Urs, Isabelle, Thomas, and Merle, thank you very much.